Hello and welcome to Conversations Unlocked, the UniCredit podcast and your gateway to industry insights. I'm Matt Thomas.
And I'm Nikolina Zečić. In this edition of Conversations Unlocked, we'll explore how we are unlocking a better bank for tomorrow. Through insights from experts and discussions with colleagues, we'll dive into some of the most exciting initiatives and developments shaping the future of UniCredit.
And in this episode, we're going behind the scenes of our bank's second ESG Day, which took place on Thursday, the 14th of November. This year's exciting event was a truly pan-European experience that brought together over 13,000 participants, with talks from expert panelists in Milan and local events taking place across many of our markets.
Together as one UniCredit, we looked at how we solve trade-offs between environmental and social concerns, achieving sustainable growth, and how we help our clients navigate the ESG transition to achieve success.
And I'll be speaking to a returning guest, our Head of Group Strategy and ESG, Fiona Melrose, about how we organised and put on this extraordinary Europe-wide affair and what lessons we can take away around how we can solve the world's biggest challenges.
And later on, in the Conversations Unlocked Culture Corner, Zsuzsanna Lazar, People and Culture Expertise Center Manager at UniCredit Bank Hungary, will be answering a question about how we embed the pillars of ESG in everything we do.
But before we dive into all that, Nikolina is going to share some internal news headlines from across the bank.
On Thursday, 5th of December, UniCredit was awarded Bank of the Year by The Banker and Financial Times for the second year in a row. We also won the awards for Best Bank in Europe and Bank of the Year in Italy, Croatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. In the words of UniCredit Group CEO Andrea Orcel, these awards are acknowledgement of the success of the UniCredit Unlock strategy, which is transforming our bank into a leader in its industry. Congratulations to all our colleagues for their hard work, which has helped us to achieve this milestone, and let's keep it up. And now, time to get the inside knowledge on UniCredit's second ESG Day. Let's hear Matt's conversation with our Head of Group Strategy and ESG, Fiona Melrose.
Thank you very much, Nikolina. I'm delighted to be joined today by Fiona Melrose, our Head of Group Strategy and ESG. It's great to have Fiona with us today. Obviously, you will know that we had our second ESG Day very recently, and we saw today's podcast as a good opportunity to kind of drill down into that a little bit. So thank you for joining us, Fiona.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. I wanted to start maybe, before we go into the event itself, just to talk a little bit about ESG. I think we might have seen perceptions change a little bit this year, perhaps around the election of Trump, and even in the UK, we've seen various commitments being rolled back. Is that something that you've noticed as well?
Certainly, you can see, I think maybe the right word would be more noise or more questioning around ESG, particularly kind of in the political arena. But at the heart, I think the need for us all to act sustainably and leave the world in the place, in the state that we found it, remains very much unchanged in people's thinking or companies' approach to the world. So I think the fundamental need to play our part in ESG and be sustainable hasn't changed, but has been more questions, and certain countries may be going at different speeds, which is a challenge. I mean, ESG itself is a very complex arena, and one does feel, when you asked about changing perceptions, that the world is becoming ever more complex in this respect.
And that's an interesting word that you used as well, challenged. And it's something, of course, that we try to tackle with this year's ESG Day. The idea that it is quite a challenge path, and we need to all kind of knuckle down and make sure we make the right decisions to ensure a better future. So maybe we can look back at the first year that we did ESG Day last year, and maybe you could comment on why we decided to launch this format as a group.
In year one, we were really looking at what the challenges were, and obviously for the second year, having already addressed that, I think the challenges we all face are very well known at this stage. What we thought was more relevant was to look at how we face those challenges. So what are the tangible things that we should be doing ourselves, and particularly companies, to approach the future, and how should we be thinking about ESG together as well in the whole, rather than just looking at the E aspect and the part that we all have to play in it. So the idea was to be, coming away with more ideas and more tangible, concrete actions that we should be considering.
Completely agree. And I think I was going to ask you how the event had evolved over the last couple of years, but I think it's clear that this year we had clients at the centre, didn't we? And I think that was shown by the great attendance that we had from our client base.
Yes, and that's one of our number one principles, is that we're fully committed to joining our clients or accompanying our clients in just and fair transition. And in a way, the second ESG day was putting that into practice. So living it, so having the clients fully involved and hearing their approaches and the ways in which they are tackling the challenges they face, so that we can all learn from each other, was really, I think, a key aspect of this year and how it differed from the first time we did ESG Day. And I think it was also very valuable in terms of the clients to hear other perspectives.
And away from the client side, internally as well this year, I mean, I think we had over 13,000 connections or people attending the event, whether that was online or in person. We have also had loads of local activation as well, particularly across CEE, which must have been quite gratifying that people were bringing this to life in their own markets in a slightly different way.
Yes, so obviously we're a bank with 13 different countries, so the approach to ESG can differ by country. So this allowed them to deal with it in the way that they felt suited them best, and also to involve their clients, whether it be there were events in branches in Italy, for example. So it was really, I think, also an educational kind of way of dealing with it, but also allowed everybody to approach it in their own way. But we always say that embedding ESG in all that we do is kind of the way that we try to approach it. And I think this certainly worked in practice.
And maybe more of a question on the staging, because I think that one of the real points of strength about this event is the real diversity of speakers that we have. I mean, if you look at the agenda this year, we started out with the climate anxiety specialists giving the keynote. We also had academics. We've already touched on the client side of things. How do we arrive on the topics that we'll cover at the event, and how do we look at the type of speakers that we want to bring in?
And I think there's so many different topics within ESG, but we were really focused on E and S together, and obviously looking very much at the social side and how it interacts with climate. So the first topic, which was the social dilemma, how climate change and technology are reshaping society, was very much trying to combine or recognize the S within ESG and also within the just and fair transition. So how there are interactions between those. And I think that worked very well. Certainly another thing that we talk about a lot when it comes to ESG is trade-offs and the interactions between all of the elements, whether that be environmental and nature, or biodiversity, or whether it be environmental and social. And that, I think, was a very valuable session, particularly with the involvement of clients and hearing, actual tangible actions that are being taken or approaches. And also, I think it was very encouraging to hear some of the solutions to the trade-offs and how actually there is a way forward, because we obviously talk about the challenges, but I think it was also with optimism that there are ways to meet the challenges, particularly in areas such as the energy transition. And then the last, but by no means least, obviously ESG continues to evolve, and natural capital, biodiversity is an area that is of increasing prominence, because without safeguarding nature, climate change is to all of our disadvantage. So we need to make sure that all these things work together in a positive fashion. So I think looking at that aspect and how businesses could approach it was a very valuable session.
So one of the main takeaways from Dieter Helm, one of the Oxford academic that we had joining us on the day, was this need to be brutally realistic about the environmental scenario. The idea that we need to be very clear about what's being sacrificed for what. And he was, of course, talking about this in a biodiversity sense. Fiona, maybe you can comment on how we approach that notion of trade-offs within our ESG strategy.
Yes, I agree. His talk at the beginning of the panel was very impactful, and I think one of the statistics that he gave in that the global economy is still around 80% dependent on fossil fuels was pretty sobering, because this hasn't moved. And if anything, if you think that 80% is now of a much larger demand, so brutally realistic is certainly very apt. And that is obviously showing us that the actions that we need to take need to be impactful and need to make a difference. And when it comes to looking at the impacts or the trade-offs, whether that be between climate and biodiversity or environment in general sense and social, that is certainly something we really do take very seriously. Certainly the work on natural capital that we are doing along with many other institutions is to ensure that there aren't, we are aware of the trade-offs being made and that there are positive trade-offs happening between climate and biodiversity. And similarly, we also take very seriously environmental versus social, and that's certainly for us something that's very key or apparent in many of our countries. We have many countries where the stage of their development is lagging, where they're still highly dependent on fossil fuels, more so than some other countries within our footprint. And that does lead to taking into consideration in even more of a way the social aspects, because there are certain decisions and times where we face key decisions or trade-offs where we need to ensure that the knock-on impact to society is minimized or taken into account.
That's a side to the debate that many of us don't really appreciate at times. Are there any examples you can bring to the fore that show that approach in action across our footprint?
There are certain examples, such as when one's thinking of countries where coal is being phased out and the extent to which one needs to consider retraining. But generally, if you look at examples such as the recent Skills for Transition program that we've launched, there we're taking into account the social side of transition, so the need for education and retraining for a relatively significant amount of the working population, and also the positive aspect of that. So we need to redirect talent and skills. So you can see it from that lens as well. So that's one example, I would say, of trying to marry social and environmental together.
Looking back at last year's event, the main takeaway, I think, and the main soundbite was this idea of cathedral thinking, which I think has a certain centrality when we talk about ESG. Was there a similar extract that comes to mind this year from the speakers that people you would want people to take away with them?
Yes, I think it was, and certainly it's resonated with me. And this was the concept of gardening thinking or garden thinking, as in you're tending a garden and all of the aspects within that garden interact and play off each other. And so you need to get all of the elements together, or all of the elements supporting each other to grow. So that certainly was a concept that I think people found helpful alongside cathedral thinking, which also in terms of the long term certainly works as well, but this was more how you deal with it as you basically move forward.
And zooming out slightly, how do you think we can be the best possible partner for our clients in this transition that we're talking about?
All companies are going through a transition. So obviously leading by example, I think, is very important for us as a institution and as a company. So when we are interacting with our clients, I think, staying true to our ESG principles, which obviously are embedded in the policies that we have, remains paramount. But there is so much work to be done on partnering with the clients in their journey. So it's very much their transition, but with us helping them and supporting them on that journey. So when we talk about a just and fair transition, we are living that with the clients. And that is an area that we've been very focused on, particularly as part of our net zero journey. And we have a transition strategy. So the interaction with the clients here and how we're advising and how we're supporting and financing them is key.
And maybe it's, you mentioned ESG principles, so it came to mind, and maybe it's a slightly cheeky question, but can you give us any clues as to, how we'll view ESG in the new plan? I know we haven't really formally announced it yet, but maybe you can give a very brief hint.
Well, in UniCredit Unlocked, which remains very much our plan, to basically reap the best that we can from our organization, it was one of the 5 strategic imperatives to embed sustainability in all that we do. And there is, that remains very much fundamental for us. We don't see ESG as an add-on. We see it as, part of our day-to-day business in terms of the way that we approach it, and obviously very much aligned with the values of the company and the purpose, particularly the purpose, which is empowering communities to progress. That is obviously in a sustainable way. So for us, the ESG strategy is very much an evolution and remains very key to our overall strategy and UniCredit Unlocked.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations again on what was a very successful event. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that we're excited for next year's edition and how it continues to evolve. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Fiona, for this conversation. As Fiona rightly pointed out, while challenges exist, there are clear paths to overcome them and move forward. I truly believe participants left feeling energized and, most importantly, equipped with practical insights and tools they can apply in their daily work, right?
Completely agree. I think at a time when there are so many negative headlines about the environmental scenario, this was an optimistic and really constructive forum that put the spotlight on the tools and best practices that we can use to drive this transition. Now it's time for this episode's Culture Corner with Zsuzsanna Lazar.
Hi, I am Zsuzsanna Lazar from UniCredit Hungary, and I am working as head of People and Culture Expertise Center. As I saw today, we are having a question about the volunteering.
Hello, my name is Cosmin Creangă, and I'm a senior policy advisor in the Group Public Affairs and Policy Department. UniCredit believes in the importance of each pillar of ESG, the environmental, the social, and the governance. For example, we recently had our International Volunteering Day, a day where we honored our commitment to the S of ESG by encouraging colleagues to give back to their communities. Do you have any tips for colleagues who want to start volunteering regularly, or, more in general, how we can all do our part to put our ESG pillars in place? Thank you.
Thanks for the great question. I think this is something that is more and more relevant in our everyday lives and also in our workplace. So it is definitely something that we need to think about and to embed in our everyday life. First of all, what I would recommend to you if you would like to have these volunteering activities in your everyday life, that you are starting with the possibilities offered by UniCredit. So I'm sure that also in your local UniCredit bank where you are working, you have several options, and please try first to join those. For instance, we are having in Hungary blood donation, tree planting, house renovation, and other possibilities that are time to time organized and advertised by the INC colleagues to the whole bank, so everybody can take part in these. Other than that, I would also recommend that you are starting with small things, with such things that are close to your heart, that you can be passionate about, and that is something that also brings to you some joy. In order that you can also establish this in the culture, you can share your positive experiences with your colleagues so that they are becoming enthusiastic to join you or join such activities also. It is also, I think, a very good possibility to have team buildings linked to volunteering. For instance, you can go for kindergarten renovation together with your colleagues, and you can enjoy. It will bring you together as a team, but as well, you are doing a right thing for the community. Going to the second part of your question, how we could take part in ESG-related activities. As you know, there are 3 pillars of ESG: the environmental, social, and governance. So it's very simple. I would say that, of course, in your everyday life, you can see, for instance, in environmental place, you can think about recycling, reusing, supporting sustainable products, even if it is not the cheapest for you individually. But knowing that this is something that you can help your environment with, I think it's very important. Then for the social part, as we were just talking about, of course, volunteering is one very much important part of this. You can also support communities in a different ways, support the inclusion, and always bear in mind that whatever you do, it is more important that it serves a community than yourself. Regarding governance, I think we are having quite a relevant part in making our policies and following our policies in the right way, making the decision makings and being advocate of the right behaviors in the bank. So first of all, you can do it in your workplace, but you can also embed it in your everyday life. Maybe you will find it not so easy when starting, but as it is becoming your routine, it will be embedded in your life sooner or later. Thank you all for joining us in the Culture Corner today.
Thank you, Zsuzsanna. Finally, here's one more piece of UniCredit news. Colleagues listening to this will know that we are into our UniCredit holiday calendar. You are receiving daily emails with invitations to exciting festive activities and holiday traditions from our countries. We hope these emails are helping to get all our colleagues into the holiday spirit, because Christmas is a season that brings the spirit of togetherness. Our Kids for Kids and Donation Day are taking place on the 13th and 14th of December, where colleagues are encouraged to donate a gift or take part in festive activities in their local area. Join in the fun and let's celebrate Christmas the way we do everything, together as one UniCredit. And thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Yes, tune in next time for more must-hear insights and conversations about life at UniCredit on another Conversations Unlocked.